Dana, we love you, and let's roll this video, and then he's going to come and share.
Well, good morning. God bless you. It's great to be with you. Mirtza and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you a little bit this morning. When we came, actually, I did watch your message last Sunday, Andy. I knew what you're up to, but I didn't know I was going to be part of it. I didn't know I was supposed to be part of a series, so I hope you don't have to pick up the pieces when we're done here, okay? But first of all, I know that many of you were praying for me last January. It's been that long ago. It seems like yesterday, but last January, the emergency, the ambulance came and picked me up off the living room floor, and I had double COVID pneumonia is what they called it, and what they call that storm, storm that gets stirred up. But I was in tough shape. The prognosis just wasn't good at all. I mean, you could see it in the nurses and the doctors, and they got me the emergency there, and there wasn't any room, so I was on that. I forgot to ask you what that was. You know what that is? Yeah, the gurney, not the journey, the gurney thing, the camilla, right? But that's in Spanish. I know what it is. But anyway, I was sitting on this thing. And by then, of course, they had oxygen, and I kind of woke up. I was kind of with the program a little bit. And so I'm sucking on the oxygen, and this young doctor comes around the corner, and he asked me, he says, do you have a living will? I really didn't know what that was, but I told him no. If I didn't know what it was, I probably shouldn't have it, right? And so I told him no, so he started going through this list. He says, well, we have these options. He says, would you take intubation, and it was kind of a surreal moment. I mean, it was interesting, it was kind of exciting even. I mean, it's hard to explain, but something I'll never forget, and I was trying to get the oxygen, and I said, no, thank you, I don't want intubation, and then he says, well, how about, cardiac resuscitation? No, thank you, I don't want that either, how about respiratory? No, thank you, and I remember, he was a young guy, and he was just perplexed, but he didn't know, the journey that we've been on, the place where we are, and I thought, man, I was coming up to the door for what I've been working at, for the last 40 years, and I think that, that's how we need to perceive life. But my daughters, they got alarmed. The doctor called them and said it didn't look too good, and so they put it on Facebook, and you know what? They were overwhelmed. They said, my daughter told me, she was overwhelmed by the response. Like several countries, thousands of people were praying for me. I mean, it was pretty humbling, and I know that you were part of that group. And for some reason, I thought the plan was for me to go. I really did. I thought, no, this is it. That's my ticket. I mean, I've been there before, but I thought this time was it, And I just felt like, for some reason, like God just pulled me back for some reason. And so I must be here for something. We'll have to figure out what that is, I guess, a little bit later. But prayer works. God responds, And so, I appreciate that. I mean, I value, what everyone did. The containers arrived to Honduras all the way. They made it the whole way. And they pulled right up in front of our house, two 40-foot containers. And, we didn't have a big crew to unload those things. And so Mirtza called the school. Mirtza did almost all the coordination and everything. She did a great job. But she called the school, and so what they did, there were 3 teachers showed up with about 12 kids, wasn't it? And then it was us, and then Pastor Henry and his wife were there, and we unloaded both those containers record time. I think it was record time, about 3 hours we unloaded those things right at our house. And we had the back porch full, the whole house is full, the front porch is full. And then we just started calling people, and they came with their trucks and their cars and pickups and whatever, from all over the different communities that we had contact with, where the need was. And so everything got, taken care of in a good and effective way. We're so thankful for the people we work with. I mean, we have a network of people down there in the school and also the churches that we work with out in La Ceiba. Everyone is so, I don't know how to say it, God-oriented. They're just about God, about who He is, that we don't have any, it'd be hard to explain this, but we don't have any problems. I mean, interpersonal problems, we just don't have that. Because when we started work there, in that area in particular, and with the school as well, I said, well, what we have is we have one purpose. We only have one purpose, and that's the glue. That's what's going to hold us together. And I figure I have a purpose here on this earth while I'm here. And just one. It wasn't confusing, so simple. The Bible's so simple to understand. And that one purpose is to what? To what? Well, to give God all the honor and all the glory. And so what we do is we go back to that page time and time and time again. So when you get up in the morning, and you think, well, hey, I'm here for something. I have a purpose. And God has invested in me. I mean, think about that. Think about how important we are. He's invested in me, and He's given me a purpose to give Him all the honor and all the glory, to reflect His Son to everyone with whom I come in contact with. I mean, that's a huge privilege. You ever think about that? What a privilege that is. The Creator God invests in me, gives me His Spirit, and He says, now just give me the honor and the glory. Go reflect my Son. So that's what we always come back to. Like, what are we about? We're about giving God all the honor and all the glory. We can have differences of opinion. That's okay. We can have those kind of things. But the thing of it is, we always come back to that page. Hey, are we giving God all the honor? Oh, okay. Not too difficult, not too complicated. Give God all the honor and all the glory. But your church has had a huge impact on Honduras, on the kingdom development. I mean, I don't have enough time today to go into a lot of details, but I mean, it is hard to believe that. I remember the day when we came here and after the service, Andy came up to me and he says, hey, Dana, we want to partner with you, for the next 10 years, and you can over the next 10 years, you plant 5 churches. And I thought, it kind of took me back, I thought, what on earth, well, okay. What do you say to that? That's good. Somebody wants to come alongside you, say, yeah, okay, good, let's go. But I don't think in numbers. I never think in numbers. Jesus never talked about numbers. He had 12 disciples, but He never told us to go have 12. He didn't tell me how many people I should have in church, and He didn't tell me how many churches I should plant. But the thing of it is, I knew what Andy was saying. He says, we want to support you while you go out and do what God would have you to do. And so that's what we did, But what we did is we went out and we to disciple is what we did, And what Andy asked for, or what he projected, I guess you're a prophet maybe. Because now we had one church and now we have 6 churches. Isn't that amazing? And you've been a huge part in that. And the partnership hasn't been just, right off the bat, I said, this partnership can't be just a check writing situation. I don't like that. What we have to do, like we're diverse members of the same body, and so we all have a part to play. And so, like what we do is we share with each other, and we're still doing that today, and we're still thinking about ways that we can work better together. And the pastors down there, the leaders in the churches, and many of the church members down there, and the people at the school, they know people from your congregation on a first name basis. They knew I was going to be here today. And they told me, always used to be when I do these tours, or I used to do tours, I'd say, oh, the people from Honduras, send you greetings. Well, this time it's the truth. They really did. Everybody, thank you for the containers, and they said, hey, tell those guys hi, and naming them by name. And they would ask me periodically, how's this guy doing? How's that guy doing? They're involved. They're interested. That's relationships. And so, anyway, when Andy said, I thought, well, it kind of took me back, but that's happened. That's happened. But it didn't really start there at that particular moment. Back in 2008, I felt like I was getting older, and you begin to look at things differently. You begin to judge life a little bit differently from a different perspective. And I felt like my window of opportunity was closing. I've been serving the Lord as best I could for many years. But I thought, no, now what I want to do is I want to take this last piece. And I looked at it as a decade, in fact, but that was in 2008. I maybe a decade left in me, energy, and cognitive ability, and I thought, well, I want to invest it here. And I had a friend, a very close friend, very close, and his name was Neftali Calix, and he'd been pastoring in a church in a place called La Ceiba. It was way up the coast, and he was very isolated in a region that had been largely ignored by the churches, and so he was out there by himself, and he'd been struggling over 17, 18 years, something like that, by himself, just barely getting by. And he always had a church of about 30 people and a bunch of kids, it was stable, but he was just barely getting by. And I thought, no, I want to go down there and I want to work with Neftali Calix. And what I want to do is build a ministerial study center there on the property where the church is. And what we're going to do is prepare leaders right there in this place, and those leaders will go out and they will plant churches and they will disciple other people. That was the vision. That was the plan. And that's what you've been involved in. But it didn't happen actually until 2014 when we were able to actually go down and actually start breaking ground, and getting things going. And during that, right there in the beginning, 2014, Pastor Neftali Calix, he says, hey, I want to introduce you to somebody. Name's Henry, and he's about 2 hours from here, and he's working in a church. And Henry had lived here in the United States, in Kansas, and he'd worked actually in a Spanish-speaking Church of the Nazarene, and he was there at that particular moment in time, helping his brother raise up a church in what they call La Nueva Confianza. And his brother had cancer, his brother passed away. So Henry was in charge. But meantime, Henry planted another church in what they call La Confianza. And so you have two churches, La Nueva Confianza and La Confianza. And so that's amazing in and of itself. But and so we met with Henry and we sat down and had coffee and we're visiting and Neftali explained what I was all about, and Henry says, well, what do you think we ought to do? And I said, disciple. Bottom line, disciple. That's it. And think about that. I watched this happen. I watched the church function, for a long time. And it never ceases to amaze me, that the church does not read, Matthew 28, 18 through 20 like it needs to be read. And you need to put your name in there. And Jesus is about to ascend to heaven. He's about to leave his disciples. He says, hey, all you guys, come up here and meet me on this hill, and I'm going to give you the last orders, the last, what you need to know, what you need to do. And so they met him up there, and he says, all authority in heaven and earth is given unto me. It was a deeper resonating voice. And he says, therefore, go and make disciples. He already showed us how to do it. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you see the whole picture. It's all painted out there for us. The procedure's there. Every detail is there. That's all we have to do is just follow Jesus. He says, go make disciples. All authority in heaven and earth is given unto me. You read the whole Bible and you go back to that verse and see what it does to you. Put your name there. See what it does to you. All authority, that's God, that's Jesus. And he's speaking to you and he's saying, hey, listen up. All authority in heaven and earth. How much authority is that? How much power is that? It's given unto me. Therefore, go and make disciples, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all of the things that I have commanded you. And therefore, I'll be with you until the end of the age. You know, I think if we want Jesus to be with us, I think it's contingent upon that. To the extent that we make disciples, Jesus will be amongst us. Our society will reflect Jesus to the extent that we disciple other people. It was Jesus' plan. It's God's plan. And you know what? It works. So I told Henry, I said, well, disciple. He says, do you have material? I said, yeah, I wrote some stuff. I got it. He says, oh, okay. He just said, okay. And you know what? He did it. We started working together, you know, the three of us. And then pretty soon, like Henry was bringing up Freddie. And so Henry left Freddie in La Confianza. And now he goes to Sava. And he starts another church in Sava. Well, that's interesting. And so then we're going along, you know, then pretty soon, Henry, he raises up Alex, another disciple. And Alex, you know, he goes to Guatemala and he studies for 1 year. After he'd taken classes with us, he did all the discipleship and everything. He goes to Guatemala for a year. He gets married over there. He marries a missionary girl, Mexican girl, and brings her back to Honduras. She preaches, she teaches. And now they're in La Ceiba. Pastor Neftali, when we're just finishing La Ceiba, when we're just finishing the ministerial study, he feels called to, you remember, now Nueva Confianza doesn't have a pastor. He feels called to La Nueva Confianza. That in and of itself was amazing because we were about finishing that building and we just fixed up the church. We just fixed up the house. We just finished the ministerial study bill. And what does he do? He goes to that new work. Now that's called a missionary. That's called a pastor. That's called a person that knows what he's about. And so Alex is there taking care of the ministerial study. And then what happens is Henry, he's pastoring there in Sava, and then he takes me up the mountain. He introduces me to Donaldo. So Donaldo is the pastor of the Esquipulas church. Some of you have been there. And then Donaldo takes us to Miramar. And so you also helped us build a church in Miramar. Discipleship. Discipleship. That's what it's all about. But you see, it really doesn't even start there. And I probably shouldn't go all the way back to Genesis to tell the whole story, right? No, probably not. Well, I will take you back to 1985. That's a while back. And you remember Neftali Calix, the guy I went down to help, you know, to work with. Well, he just accepted the Lord. And when I first knew Neftali, he was standing alongside the road. He had a roadside stand, and he had a razor-sharp machete. And what he'd do is peel coconuts and oranges, you know, and sell them to the passers-by. And then at night he'd play guitar in a local cantina. That's Spanish for pub. And he smoked cigarettes one right after the other. And what do you suppose? After Lee, he comes to the Lord, you know, in church there in San Pedro Sula, and I never saw a guy change so fast. I mean, he just turned around. You know what it says? When Jesus says, repent for the kingdom of heaven is near. What he's saying is he's saying, turn around. You've been walking with the devil long enough, man. And what he's saying, he said, repent for the kingdom of heaven is near. He's just saying, turn around, walk with me. That's not complicated. You know, and that is exactly what Neftali did. He turned around and he started walking with Jesus, and he would attend church and he'd read his Bible. He was a sponge. I mean, he just soaked stuff up, you know, and about 3 weeks after he accepted the Lord, his son, his little 2-year-old son that wasn't with him, was staying with extended family, fell down the stairs and he died. He passed away. And Mirtza and I thought, uh-oh, that's the end of Neftali's faith journey. Because trials come, you know, but what people need when trials come, they need God, they need Jesus, but they need people. They need friends. And so what happened was, like, the church got together and they gave him the news and they got around him and they prayed for him. It was awful, but at the same time it was beautiful. I mean, it's ironic, kind of paradoxical. It was awful and it was beautiful because like the pain that he suffered right then, but somehow he was able to give that to God, put it on the altar, and everything he had was invested in that little kid. Well, he felt called to the pastorate, and Mirtza and I had been married about 6 months. So we did the very logical thing, and we said, well, since you can only take the ministerial classes in the capital city, Tegucigalpa, about 4 hours from there, and that's where we were living, you better just come and live with us. And so he did. He moved in with us. And I remember, I'd take him to work with me, and he'd help me build the churches or whatever I was doing, and so he'd receive a little bit of money that way, and then he'd take the classes at night, and, things were going along pretty well, and he was helping us at a church Mirtza and I were planting there in the capital city, and everything was going pretty well. And then one morning we get up and, we're having breakfast. He's sitting across from me, and it was a stormy night, lightning, thunder, just a real storm blew through there, one of those that scares you, And he's sitting there looking at me, and I kind of look at him, blank stare, and he says, hey, Dana, he says, I had a dream. Okay, And he says, yeah, I had a dream. He said, I dreamed that I got up this morning, and you and Mirtza weren't here. And I'm thinking, okay, And he says, well, it was a rapture. It was a rapture, and you were gone, and I was still here, and I didn't understand what he thought. What are you talking about? I thought he was doing great, And he says, I have to get my life in order. And I said, well, what does that mean? He says, I have to go to Trujillo. That was like 10 hours up the coast, I have to go to Trujillo to get my significant other. We need to get married. I didn't even know he had a significant other. They were strangers. So she's living way up the coast, So we put him on the bus, and he brings her back. They get married. And you know what? They eventually took that church that we started there in Tegucigalpa. That's how that started. But after all those years, you think about Nephtali colleagues, and things are tough in Honduras sometimes. I mean, they're tough for pastors sometimes. I mean, it's just difficult. But he knew he could call somebody. We spent a lot of time together in church, out of church, working together. We get along. I mean, we're more than, more than just church members. We're family. And when Nephtali had a need, I felt like it was my need. And I'd step right in, okay, let's see what we can do about this, And so, those things happen time and time and time again. And there was one time not too awful long ago, like a few years back, he said something that kind of took me back. He said, Dana, he says, you're not just my best friend, you're my only friend. It was he's going through a real tough time. How many of us have ever gone through a real tough time? Just Andy. That's about every other week, right? He was going through a real tough time, And what he was saying, he was saying, I can depend upon you. And I thought, no, that can't be right. He can't have just one friend. And I know he doesn't just have one friend. I know he has more friends. And I'm sure that after that, he'd been able to rethink that a little bit. But what he was saying, he was saying, I have somebody I can depend upon. I have a friend. Like, you're the one guy that I know that I can come to when a need comes up. How many of us need a friend? Nobody? How many of us need a best friend? How many of us need somebody that we can depend upon every day, all day? How many of us in these uncertain times need somebody that we can depend upon? Somebody that will provide for us stability, certainty. We can go to any time we want. Do we need that? There are a lot of people in this world that need just that. They need a friend. You know, we wonder, like, what's discipleship all about? That's a lot of it right there. Just being a friend. And it's too bad, you know, our society, I guess it's not even our society, it's the world today. How many people have one of these things? You know, Mirtza and I get around. We've been on subways, you know, and planes and airports and stuff like that. You know, and you used to see people, you know, sitting down beside each other and visiting a little bit, you know, or at least aware of their surroundings, you know, but not now. You know, we're in big cities, you know, and people get on these subways and most of them have the earplugs in right off the bat. And they're looking at it and they're listening. They barely, you know, keep from tripping over the steps. And they get on the subway, sit down, you know, and they are totally focused on that thing. And I'm thinking, you're looking on Facebook. You probably got 1,000 friends just like me, and you don't even know them. Those aren't the people you can depend upon. Those aren't the people that you can call up when you're in a crisis. Nothing's going to happen. You know, and so technology is wonderful. It's beautiful, you know. I mean, it helps us in a lot of ways, but it's also very dangerous. It's separated. It's become an impediment to the church development. Because what it does is it eliminates or impedes, at least, you know, relationship development. How many times during the week, you know, like Andy says, you know, he says, he just told me coming through the door, he says, you're my mentor, you know. Well, how does that happen? Well, that sits down eating, cooking, drinking coffee. That's discipleship. I mean, we need curriculum. We need a Bible, you know. That's good to have. A program, good to have, you know. But the thing about it, what it's all about, you know, is about sitting down and drinking coffee with somebody, eating a sugar cookie. You can get a lot done that way. That's what we've done in Honduras. It's just that. You know, but I'd like to read this scripture in here that it's so interesting when we read through this, you know, and it's like, this was written so long ago, you know, but it looks like the guy was sitting here. You know, here in Matthew, you know, 4, chapter 12, it says, when Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he said he withdrew to Galilee. Leaving Nazareth, he went to live and lived in Capernaum, which is by the lake of the area of Zebulun, it says in Naphtali, to fulfill what was said through the prophet Isaiah. Land of Zebulun, it says land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of Gentiles. So the people, listen to this, like, the people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in a land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. I think about that. When I read that, you know, this morning, you know, I thought, that's us today. Think about that. We are a people, you know, we are a people living in darkness. Like I said, we get around, and there's no place to go to get away from the darkness. You have to be the light where you are, because everywhere else is dark. It doesn't matter where you go, what country you go to. It doesn't matter. The darkness can be overwhelming. And if you're not the light, it will consume you. We have an option. You know, and that was a situation right then that the prophet was talking about. You know, a situation that they were living in. And it says right here that the people living in darkness have seen a great light. We've seen a great light, haven't we? Do we have the great light? That's beautiful. There's no other book that will give you that hope. There's no other God that will give you that security. It's that security that you need when you're sitting in the emergency room. You really don't care if you stay or go. And you're kind of excited because you think you're on your way. That's the kind of security we need when we walk out the door, because you don't know from one day to the next just exactly what's going to happen. And I'll tell you what, we all have a date. We're mortal, We all have a date. I don't know how you perceive that date as a threat, or as a promise. Like death, defined as separation. It says like people are separated from the glory, We all have sinned. We're separated from the glory of God, Well, that's another definition for death. How would it be when we're separated from this place right here? This place. How would it be? What's it going to be like? Someday we're going to experience it. What's that going to be like? I think it's going to be very exciting. I think the trip's going to be exciting. Getting there, man. Well, anyway, it says, a light has dawned. And then we see that, read down here, and it says, Jesus calls his first disciples. I find this passage very interesting. He said, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew, and they were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. It says at once they left, and then we read down there again, it happens again, They even left their father. They were mending the nets, and they left their father, Left their job, just took off, go with Jesus. Come, follow me. Well, we know biblically, we know that isn't the first time he'd been with these people, but I'm convinced that he spent a lot of time with these guys. I'm sure that they sat on a beach and they had fish together. I'm sure that they probably went out fishing together. And he spent a lot of time talking to them prior to this moment. And I'm sure that he said, hey, I'm going to come by here one day, and that's going to be the signal, vámonos. Vámonos. You know what that means? Let's go. Let's go. Because think about that. It says they left their net. They were ready. They were anxious for that moment to arrive when Jesus comes by and he tells us to go with him. Man, we're ready. We're ready. We're ready. Let's go. Let's go. And that didn't cost them anything. Boom. They left it and they went with him to hang out for 2.5 years. Hang out. That's discipleship. That's the model. I'm sure that he hung out with them a lot before he called them. Somebody doesn't have to come to the Lord before we disciple them. Like I say, go back to the coffee and a cookie. Come, follow me, he says, that once they left their nets. We have the answer that everyone else needs. How much today can you depend upon the stock market? I know it looked good right now. I don't know why. How much can you depend upon medical services? It took me forever to get into the hospital. I couldn't get anybody to take care of me. How much, can we depend on anything today? We can't. Everything else is an illusion. Everything else is temporary. The only thing that is consistent is God, Jesus' message, and his message hasn't changed. Over the millennia, it has not changed. He says, from that time on, Jesus says, he began to preach, and what did he say? Very, very difficult message. So complex. He says, repent. He says, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. How hard is that to do? How hard is that to do? It says they were in darkness, and he's the light. And I can see the light here. How hard is that to do? And the problem today is if you're not walking with Jesus, you're walking with the devil. You might have good manners, but you're going with him. Jesus says, repent. How complicated is that? That means turn around 180 degrees, not not 75. 180 degrees, and you go back, and now you're walking with Jesus. But you have to walk with Jesus every day. You know, and the brother up here, he made reference to John chapter 8, 31, 32. When Jesus said, he said, remain in the Word, remain in the Word. What does that mean to remain in the Word? That means stay there. Get off Facebook. Stay there. You know, get in the Word. You know, he says, remain in the Word. You will truly be my disciples. You will know the truth, and that truth will set you free. What do people need today? They need to be free. They need to be free. That truth will set you free. Human beings love to complicate things. I remember years back, I read this passage. I wanted to complicate. I said, this has a deep meaning. This must have a meaning that I'm going to have to study to dig it out. And you read commentary after commentary, you looked it up, you picked it apart, and it means Jesus is Lord. That's it. That's all he come up with. So I think, wow. He says, remain in my word. You will truly be my disciples. You will know the truth. Jesus is Lord, and that truth will set you free, I promise. And that's enough.
Dana, thank you. That just fits in with the series, because what you've shared is that when we depend on the things that aren't dependable, it will break our joy. It will dash our joy. But when we put our hope in the only one who can keep every promise he's ever made, who can free us and release us from bondage and remake us into the image that he originally created us, that's where unstoppable joy comes. I want to challenge you as a follow-on to this message. You have a light in you if you've ever said yes to Jesus. If you're here this morning and you've never said yes to him, say yes. Let him be the leader of your life. Do that 180-degree turn and allow him to begin to move you in a new direction. Begin to follow him. If you've got that light in you and you've already said yes to Jesus, but you don't have someone who is following, not you, but Jesus in you, maybe it's time to build a relationship with somebody, because that's what discipleship is. That's what Jesus calls us to share the light that we have in us with someone else. And you can't do that unless you're connected with somebody. We have something called the Journey Study here. Maybe you say, I don't have a friend. Well, we'd love to pair you up with someone. If you go to the next step wall, you can pull that Journey Study off. We'd love to connect you with someone who then will be your friend, who will do this journey with you so you can discover over these 8 weeks who Jesus is, and you can start to build relationship, because that is what Jesus calls us to do. But you don't have to do the Journey Study. Maybe you're here and you're a point of light in your community. There's somebody next door. You have permission. Go spend time with them, build a relationship with them, and begin to share your life with them. Sugar, cookies, and coffee. It really does work. I'm just saying. Maybe you can substitute something else, but it really does work. And that's what Jesus calls us to. It's that simple. That's the kind of church that we want to be. That's the kind of church we are. And so get involved, get connected, be a contributor, begin to disciple, and change the world, because that's what the world needs. And that's how not only you will be filled with unstoppable joy, but that's how the world's going to find it. It's going to be because you're doing what God's called you to do. Well, we're going to dismiss in here in just a second. We don't really dismiss, we send out. You're going out into the world to go do what God's called you to do. I want to encourage you, if it's time for you maybe to take a step and serve by going on this trip to build relationships with people halfway across the country, or the world rather, then maybe this trip is for you. Rob Alexander will be standing out there. He can give you a card and you can read about the details. And maybe it's time for you to say, you know what, I don't know, this is out of my comfort zone, but I'm going to go to Honduras. I'm going to serve on this short-term mission trip. I'm going to build relationships, and I'm going to help build a church building maybe, or whatever it is that God calls us to do this year. We don't ever really know. Flexibility is got to be at the top of the list when you're on one of these teams, just so you know. But maybe that's the step that God's calling you to take. Get out of your comfort zone. It's time to go. It's time to trust. You don't have to worry about all the details. Just take the step you know that God's calling you to take and trust Him to work out the details, the money, the time, the courage. He'll do that for you as you take the step. So pick up that card. Maybe you want to learn more about Honduras. Again, after this service in the gym, we're going to be in there, and we're going to have some food and just tell more about what's going on and just connect with others who've gone. Love for you. If you've been to Honduras or want to go to Honduras or want to hear more, love for you to join us. And, would you just, again, would you thank Dana and Mirtza for coming and just sharing their lives with us? Would you?